This is the Art of Network Engineering podcast. In this podcast, we'll explore tools, technologies, and talented people. We aim to bring you information to expand your skill sets and toolbox and share the stories of fellow network engineers.
Welcome to the Art of Network Engineering. Actually, hold up. Welcome to the Art of Network Sales Engineering. I am your host, Aaron. Hello. I'm only one of three on our lovely panel this evening. With me, I have Daniel Howdy Packet Richards. How are you, sir?
Howdy. Doing good. Yourself?
I'm well, thank you. It's actually raining here in San Diego, which is like a total freak out moment for absolutely everybody here. Trust me, it's like an apocalypse. So other than that, yeah, I'm cool. And Andrew, how are you, sir?
I'm better now. This is a highlight of my week, as I said before. Does it not rain in San Diego often? Is that like a weird thing?
Nah, like
really?
Never. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe like 15 to 20 times a year.
Wow.
If I had to guess.
Do y'all know how to drive in rain?
No, absolutely not.
Why are we all not living in San Diego? I'm still trying to figure out why I'm here. I mean, it was 70 degrees and beautiful today, but
dude,
it's a rarity lately.
I was talking to my mom the other day on the phone, and I will just get off on a tangent, but I think this is career related because I think it's a big deal. And I was asking my mom, like, I don't know, my dad just retired and he's just been working forever. Like, he should have retired years ago, but he's like, I'm just gonna keep working because that's what I do. But I was asking her, like, because it just hit me all at once. I was like, what is it you go to work for? This is what I don't understand. Like, why are you going to work? I get it. You have to feed yourself, right? But what else? And the only other thing that I could think of
Can I guess?
was, yeah, go ahead.
Health insurance.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
It's expensive.
So I don't die. Yeah.
It's expensive. Yeah.
Even when you do go to work, it's still expensive. But yeah, I was like, hey, what do you actually go to work for? My mom's like, I don't know, because clearly she knows me. She thinks it's like a trick question. I'm like, no, I'm serious. Like, I don't know, because everybody I know that does not live here is always like, oh, isn't it expensive? Isn't it expensive? I'm like, yeah, but quite honestly, what else am I going to spend my money on? You know what I mean? So I just try to increase my earnings
and spend it on perfect weather, right? Like, why not?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. And I watch. You guys ever watch like HGTV, where like my wife and I do every night, where it's we like to watch the show, the House Hunter show, where they go overseas, and it's always people, and they're always retiring and then moving to like Colombia or somewhere in Central America where it's like really cheap and you get the great weather and stuff. And I'm like, man, what if they knew that you didn't have to wait until you retired to do that? And I'm not talking smack on other parts of the country, because I've lived on basically all four corners of our country.
I think people live where they live to be with their family of origin. The only reason probably. I'm in Pennsylvania is because that's where most of my family is. If I didn't have family here, I'd probably bolt out to San Diego and get some of that sunshine.
I follow my wife to New Jersey. Trust me, there's no reason to move to New Jersey.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, we have a fourth person on the panel. His name is Jeff Clark. He is a Fortinet SE. Jeff, nice to meet you. How you doing?
That's all right. No, I've just felt like I was just watching.
No, you're right on the money. No, and that actually told a lot about you as a person, and actually inadvertently told a lot about why you have the job you have, which is a sales engineer. So first of all, where do you live, Jeff? Just so we can get that. You said New Jersey?
Yeah, but there's a better way to say that. We say we live just outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
That's the better way to say I live in New Jersey.
Okay.
So if anyone ever tells you they live just outside of Philadelphia, they live in New Jersey.
All right, that's fair. So. Hey, I don't know anything, so I'll just take your word for it.
Me neither.
Yeah, Dan and I are clueless. So Jeff, real quickly, do you mind saying where you work?
No, I mean I've got a
Fortinet hat. You're
like we're on
breathing
audio podcast, so it's
right.
Got a Fortinet hat, got my Fortinet cup. I tried to intentionally turn the thing so it wasn't look like I was advertising too much.
Tell me about.
I didn't want to look like I was.
Tell me about the Forti camper.
Yeah, and I have a. Well, so Fortinet. everyone makes fun of the naming convention here at Fortinet because everything's Forta.
Everything's Forta. Yeah, it's like McDonald's, like Mick, whatever.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we get on the phone with a customer like, oh man, you guys name everything Forta. I'm like, listen, there's no way you can make fun of it more than we do.
You're like, hey bro, just pay your Forta bill and shut up.
Yeah. So I got the Forta camper. Is when COVID hit, I knew I was going to be working from home. I knew my kids were going to be home. I knew my wife was going to be home. And I knew I was going to be on calls all day long. And Aaron, you can relate to this. I've heard you talk on other episodes about being in a small space, and it's horrible, rough. So just before COVID hit, when I knew the kids were coming home, I went out and bought a 29-foot travel trailer for like $3,000 off some dude, which is crazy because now it's worth like $8,000. The only time in history travel trailers have gone up in value is during COVID. But bought this thing, set it up as my office. I've got my server closet is the old TV cabinet where everything is supposed to sit. And,
oh, tight.
Yeah.
So you have a whole stack of Fortinet gear in that would basically make most enterprises foam at the mouth when they saw it, right?
Well, so this will make Andy mad. Most of my labs are virtual. And it's not because I don't agree with him that a physical lab is, from a learning experience, better. But, I mean, you know this, Aaron, is an SE, you're building and tearing your lab apart.
Right.
I mean, almost on a daily basis.
Jeff, I was labbing OSPF this morning. I was in a virtual lab. It's okay.
Okay, see.
See. Yeah, there's an ease part of it. I think Andy's big thing is like, look, you need to have at least experience knowing how to plug things in. And you know what I mean? Seeing a rack for the first time. Those are all good soft skills.
It's amazing the number of problems that are layer 1.
And what I would call layer 0 too, which is like the person's brain. So Jeff, what is your title, and tell us what the heck that even means?
So I am a Fortinet SE, which can be, depending on who you ask, it can be systems engineer or sales engineer. Okay. And basically what that role is, the way I describe it to my wife when she asks what I do constantly is I'm the nerd that would talk to your nerd if you owned a company. To talk to them about our nerd products.
Okay.
So that's what a Fortinet SE does, or that's what an SE in general does, is they're the ones that from the sales perspective, talk about the technical stuff. We're the ones that figure out, how are we going to meet a customer's needs? Do we meet a customer's needs? We explain products that we have and do a lot of demos. We do a lot of proof of concepts, lab stuff up. And then we're part of the account management team, at least here at Fortinet, afterward. There are some companies where the SE is pre-sales only. Mm-hmm. We are mostly pre-sales, but we are still part of the account management team after the sale is done. So I talk to customers every day that are existing customers and have Forta stuff.
Forta stuff. Wow.
Yeah.
So you haven't always been this illustrious sales engineer, and I don't want to go too far into it because Andy on his YouTube channel has a full-blown interview where you give out your entire life story. So if you guys want to check that out, if you all want to check that out, go check out Andy's YouTube page, and you can see every last little bit of Jeff over there. But just kind of give us the Cliff Notes version of, because before we actually hit record tonight, Andy was alluding to that you haven't always been in the not just in the SE role, of course, but in the industry, period. So maybe talk to us about what you did before that, and then the pivot, why the pivot, and then how you ended up at Fortinet.
Yeah, so if we go back, I actually was kind of a late bloomer in IT. I didn't get started in any form of IT until around 2010. I was previously in mostly sales jobs. I did door-to-door sales, selling books. At one point, I worked on a dairy, milking cows.
Wow.
And then I got into the mortgage
Dan. Did you see Dan's here?
My God.
I did video editing for 3 years. So I've kind of done. Yeah.
That's you just described
we have some
Dan.
stuff in common. Yeah.
Did we just become best friends?
I think we did. I'm blushing. And then I got into
Andy lives in a camper.
Man, so much in common. And then what I thought was going to end up being a career, because it paid well, was I got into the mortgage industry. I started selling mortgages. And that went really well, but I got into it in about 2006. 2008.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Everything crashed.
Say no more.
Held on for about 6 months and found myself in a place where there was no work. And I went from making a 6-figure income to nothing. And so it's weird. The way I got into IT, I've always been technical. I was the family IT guy for years.
All right.
And I got into IT because my dad didn't know how to work stuff, but he really liked gadgets. And so he'd buy that new thing and be like, "That's broken." And he'd throw it down, and I'd go pick it up. I'd read the manual, as you guys have alluded to in the past. Just read the manual.
Read the manual, yeah.
And so I'd read the manual. I'd figure out how it worked, and I'd teach him how it worked. So I was probably an SE at the age of 7. If you think about it. So anyway, I got out of the mortgage business and didn't know what to do with my life. I had no idea. And a friend of mine started taking, who had also been in the mortgage industry, started taking these classes in network engineering. And I remember thinking, what an incredibly boring thing. And
you're not
like,
wrong.
No, man. He's like, no, it's so cool. He says, you got to come get into this. So I went to a CCNA class he was taking, and I showed up on the night they were doing subnetting. And it was weird. I'm sitting there, and most people just completely hate subnetting. But I sat there on that night, and suddenly it clicked that a subnet mask could be something other than 255.255.255.0. And I suddenly understood what it was, and I was hooked. And I signed up for the class. I signed up to take the CCNA classes that night, took the CCENT or the Net Plus first, then got into the CCNA, and then realized that now I have certs. I took the certs, eventually passed after failing the first time. Then I realized that you can have certs, and that gets you an interview, but if you have no experience, you can't get the job. Which is really frustrating because the job is the only way to get the experience. So,
yes.
So what I did was I went and started a podcast.
Okay.
And I started, and this was I think talked about in the last episode when you were talking about Tim. Talking to Tim, and he was talking about technical interviews. I started a podcast called Tech Tip Tuesday, and the whole premise of it was a 3 to 5 minute video on something on the internet, something on the iPhone, some app, whatever. And it had to be so simple that my mom could understand it. And then I put that on my resume, and I started repairing iPhones and fixing people's computers and making $20 here, $20 there. And I got an interview with a managed services provider, a small MSP, and they offered me a job because I did a podcast, because they wanted to do a podcast. So I talked about technology without having any technology experience and landed my first tech job.
Okay. And so you put. I want to back up. You put, because I've mentioned this before. I think we all have at some point, and maybe not directly a podcast, but like even in the home lab, put that on your resume. Like you did it. It like the resume just doesn't have to be like work experience. But even though that is, because like if you get paid to do something, that's work, right? Like that's actually the definition I think of a professional, right? If you get paid to do something, does that make you a pro?
Yeah.
Right?
Like if you don't get paid and you still put it on your resume, they don't ask you if you got paid.
Right, of course. Well, I don't mean that's the only criteria, but yeah, the point is like if you did it, put it on the resume, right? And for you, it was like let me just do some. I mean, that was just a long shot. It must have felt like a long shot. Like let me just try this, right? And look what happened, right? So I guess my point is, if you have an idea of something that you might want to put on your resume that you've done that's going to make you stand out from other people, do not hesitate to put it on there. The worst thing that they're going to do is go, hey, why did you put this on there? But I can guarantee you no recruiter's going to go, why'd you put this on here? You know what I mean? Yeah. They're looking for everything that you've done. So, be proud of yourself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Put it out there.
Put your stuff out there. You were making YouTube videos, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I was also putting them on Apple. They were on the actual, they were posted everywhere you could do podcasts. And I ended up somehow getting featured as an Apple featured podcast, and my viewership went from like 200 to like 10,000 viewers in a week.
Can you tell us how to do that?
No idea. So the answer, sadly, is I wish I could. But I wasn't even really trying to make a podcast when I started. I was just trying to send friends and family videos on how to do stuff so they'd stop calling me. Right. And then it turned into a podcast because they kept forwarding it, and I was putting them up on YouTube anyway. So then I, got a web page. And
is that how this company heard about you that hired you, the MSP? Did they hear the podcast?
No, I was applying everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if there's anything I can tell anybody who's a new network engineer, the hardest part of network engineering is getting the first job. Once you have the first job, it becomes easier and easier to get a job because you begin to know people, and those people will move to other companies, and then they'll tell you about a position that opens up, and now your resume's got experience. So the hardest thing, I mean, it's not subnetting, it's not MPLS, it's not BGP, it's getting the first damn job.
Right.
So anyway, I got that.
A little unconventional, of course, but I think we've grown to find that the unconventional is conventional. I mean, everybody has some kind of weird story like that, right? Like I especially love the pivot moves, right? Like you pivoted, you randomly found yourself, and this is actually the best part of your story is the fact that you walked in on probably what I think every one of our peers would say to this day was probably the worst possible time you could have walked in that room when they were doing subnetting, because there's no easier way to turn most people off. You know what I mean? Like, and it sounds like you got it pretty quickly. I was not one of those people. I mean, I'm talking days. Like, what does it all mean? They're giving me like guys drawing a piece of a pie, and he's like, well, then this, and then this, and then you're on this side, and then and I'm like, what? No, where's the pie coming? Who's making the pie?
I almost quit over subnetting.
Same, dude. I couldn't handle it.
It wasn't for me.
I couldn't handle it.
So, well, see, I can't remember names. I can't remember. Yeah, the only thing I can remember, and the only things that really work for me in my head is numbers. So if all of you had a number, I've had everybody's name memorized. So subnetting with numbers, just it resonated with me for some reason in that class. Not only that, but the teacher was dual CCIE, really smart dude, but more importantly, really good at explaining things. He worked for Cisco. Things. Yeah, he was a great teacher.
That's
and so
awesome.
that made subnetting more comfortable, because it's such a foreign concept and you don't know anything about it.
Exactly.
Network in general is.
That's what I mean.
So,
yeah.
So Jeff, you don't like DNS then? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Who's saying that? Me? No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
It's just not as good as IP addresses.
He's the only person that types IP addresses in his web browser. Yeah.
Come on.
The hard way.
So anyway, got that first job. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're at the MSP. What was the responsibility at the MSP then?
So I had the role of a VCIO, or Virtual Chief Information Officer. It is a role that not a lot of MSPs have, but basically my job was to listen to people complain all day long about the lack of service they were getting from the support team.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was oddly SE-esque but in the worst way possible. Because I was technical and I was part of the sales team, but they were not a well put together organization at the time. I'm sure they're better now, but anyway, so I got to listen to a lot of complaining, and so as soon as I got there, I knew I wanted to get out. But I knew I wanted to get out before I took the job. That was never the end goal for me. That job was the only way I could get experience on my resume, and so I don't think I ever took my resume off the internet. It was, I was looking as soon as I got there for the next thing. So the friend that got me into networking, ironically, then landed a job at the place Andy and I used to work, which I think we can just say, well, I can say where I worked. I'm not going to say where Andy did, but at Comcast. Yeah. So I got a job there at the NOC. He got a job there at the NOC and told me to apply. And so I'm not a huge believer in certs, but one of the things I do believe that certs are valuable for is getting you in front of people.
Absolutely.
So he got me the chance to at least talk to somebody there at Comcast. And I'm asking him about it, and he says, the one thing you don't have is any Juniper certs, and Comcast has got a lot of Juniper stuff.
Yeah.
And he says they want you to send your resume. So I went on my resume, and I lied. And I said I had the JNCIA. And then I went and I bought the JNCIA book. And I knew my interview was in 10 days, and I knew I wouldn't go to that interview if I didn't have the JNCIA. So I studied my ass off for 3 days straight, 4 days straight, and then went and took the JNCIA and passed it. So
attaboy.
When I went to the interview, I did have the JNCIA.
Wow. Attaboy.
Dang.
I like it.
So,
speak it into fruition, right?
Yeah.
Or lie yourself into fruition.
Yeah.
Yes, I have.
I know.
Juniper
the next place I apply at, I'm going to be like, I got a CCIE, and then I'm going to see what happens 3 days later.
Well, no, you
probably
have
won't
to
turn out.
get it before the interview.
Right, yeah.
That's a
probably
secret.
Won't turn out so hot. So you got the job at the Comcast NOC. Andy's there, we have a kind of a running tally of people that Andy's worked with at the Comcast NOC. But so you worked at NOC. How long were you at the NOC for?
I was there from, I think, 2013 to 2015. Sounds about right. I was looking at my resume because I figured this question might come up. And what's funny is I bombed that interview. I did not deserve that job.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you that, Jeff, because I bombed the interview too. Was it a rough technical interview for you?
It's a rough technical interview when you don't have any experience in networking, right? And they ask you a networking question that is not something that you were prepared for. And it doesn't matter what the question is. If they ask you a difference between an access port and a trunk port, if you're not ready for that question and you don't have experience, that question is a daunting question.
100%.
And I'm a bad test taker, and I've up until recently was a bad technical interviewer. I really, really struggled with technical interviews. So yeah, I bombed that interview at Comcast pretty badly. But luckily, my friend there, he was a rock star, and so he vouched for me, and they liked me as a person, and I got the job.
Yeah.
And then the first thing I started doing was looking for ways that I could be different at Comcast. You know, what's something I could do that no one else is doing? And I started doing automation before automation was talked about. And I mean, it wasn't anything great. I was using Excel and Visual Basic scripts to automate the creation of tickets.
You say it wasn't great, but everybody there, all 3 shifts and management, thought it was magical, and I still think it's magical. Because you saved so much time. It used to take us 25 minutes to open one ticket.
That was horrible.
And your tool that you created broke it down to what, 30 seconds, maybe a minute?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the power of automation. It's crazy.
Yeah, useful. So let me ask you this. Did you henceforth put automation on your resume?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I put on the resume that what I created that took the ticket creation time from 15 minutes down to 30 seconds. Because
he's smart, folks. He's smart.
But I think the important thing in this industry is if you've ever had to interview somebody, and last week's episode was a great episode where they were talking about the technical interviews. You end up you want nothing more than for that person to be successful on that interview. You want them to be good.
Right.
And so if you can tell your story on your resume, a little bit of something, and then be prepared to take that interview and turn it into the thing where you're really successful at, you're going to do really well in your interview. So when they're like, what do you know about MPLS? And you're like, nothing, but can I tell you about this? If you can figure out how to turn that conversation into your favor, do the same thing with your resume, tell your story, and always be looking for the thing that makes you unique at a company.
Yeah, so it's less like, hey, what they're focusing on like what you don't know, putting like a red check mark next to it, and it's more like glass half full situation, looking at what you do know and how much of it, as opposed to I asked like 5 questions that he had no idea about, but he gave me like multiple alternatives to kind of at least see what he's made of, right? Like that's, I think that's good advice.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what Tim was saying, like, set it up to where the person can talk about something that they're really knowledgeable about, and you kind of like let them take over that conversation.
Let them be comfortable. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And exactly. I just want to point out or draw this parallel between Jeff and I when we left Comcast. When I left Comcast, there was no retention offers. Nobody was all that worried about it. And when Jeff told him he was leaving, it was a mad scramble to like, oh my God, who's going to maintain this ticket tool he created? And it was like 24/7 Jeff training the entire NOC, all 3 shifts, on how to manage this automated tool he created.
Dang, that's awesome.
Yeah, he was a rock star.
More importantly, that shows how bad I am at programming, that it was so confusing.
Right, yeah.
So poorly documented that they're like, someone has to take care of this.
It's supposed to be easy. That's the whole point, right? So when you did leave, after you took me and my scripts are leaving. So when you left, where did you go next? So it's 2015 now at this point, right?
Yes. So that move was actually probably my scariest move, because at this point I had a job at Comcast. I had I wasn't making great money, but I was making
very comfortable
money. Yeah, I was making enough money to feed the family.
Complacent.
And but I'd reached a point there where I would either move up or I needed to move out. And there was a manager in a totally different department. He and I were chatting one day, and he said, listen, he says, Comcast is a great place to work. He says, but if you move up within an organization, your pay increments are going to be based off of what you currently make. He says, if you move out, he goes, you're going to get in your career 2 to 3 major jumps in income. He says, I like having you here, and I'd like to see you back here at Comcast, but I think that instead of applying for the Corps, you should get out.
Okay. Can you get this guy? Can you give this guy our phone number? Like we need to talk to him because that is golden wisdom.
He'd be great to have on here. He's a technical heavy hitter and a very smart guy.
That to me, like those are thoughts that are floating around in my head. I just don't know how to articulate them, and that was it right there. Yeah. And it's funny that you say that too, because I was actually thinking earlier today. This is so weird. I was thinking to myself, like, the best advice I would ever give somebody that was like that used to be a cable guy like me or is a current cable guy, I would say move up to a position that you want within the company, right? Because you need a springboard, right? You need it's good to have, that's a good entry point because it's very easy to get into. And it's also very easy to excel at. So you can get, to that next point. But once you get to that next point, you should bounce, right? Because you should bounce with your new credentials. You'll immediately, like you just said, you can pick how much you want to make at that point because you don't have to accept anything that you don't want. You know what I mean? So you could just see what's out there, like you did, like you were saying, like I never even took my resume off the internet, But going down that path, it's like if I just find what I actually do want, whether it's a little bit more, a lot more, or maybe just a company I want to work at, and then lo and behold, you can come back to the company that you left, right? Especially left on good terms, and they're just gonna pay you what you're worth now. You're like, I don't. It doesn't matter what I left at, right?
But you can't ignore how risky a move it was.
Absolutely,
and how terrifying it was. You had a wife, you had kids, you had a mortgage, and you had a job you'd never lose.
And this was a contractor gig.
Yeah.
So I had to move
similar
to a contractor role.
Yep.
And it was a contract to perm, and so the technical interview. I warned you about this, Andy, before we started this.
It's good.
Before we started the podcast.
Go for it.
The technical interview was one of the most frustrating experiences because I'm at work. I'm outside, standing out there. It's cold. I'm out there with my phone, kind of huddled in the corner, so I'm not being seen by anybody, ready to take this interview. And they get on, and usually before an interview starts, they want to know, tell me about yourself, tell me what you do, all that. They're like, oh, hey, this is this person, and this is Jeff that we're interviewing here today, and he currently is a dock engineer over at Comcast. Jeff, tell me how a traceroute works. And because I was outside, I had my phone on mute. And I said, I hate interviews. But my phone wasn't on mute. And I looked back to go to unmute it to answer this.
Oh my God.
And there is, and it's not even like I got laughter or anything like that. I got silence.
Dude, I'm cringing right now for you.
First question of the technical interview, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's not that it's a difficult question, but it's not something where you're talking about incrementing TTLs and you don't think about how a trace route works. Right. You think about what a trace route does, why you would use a trace route. And I'm prepared for that. But how does a trace route work? It was just, it was so frustrating. And it was out of the gate. So the rest of the interview, I thought I did pretty terribly. And I hang up, and my phone rings half an hour later. And it's the recruiter, and he says, you got the job.
Whoa.
And I said, well, I don't have the job. I haven't even met these guys yet. I said, I want to go in there and talk to them in their office. I want to meet these people. I want to see where they work. And so he's like, but you got the job. I was like, no, I know, but I want to go talk to them. So he calls them up, and they're like, okay. So I go in, and now I'm interviewing them.
Nice.
And I'm sitting there chatting with them at, first off, one of the largest data centers in the 401 North Bride. I was working for, the company was SunGuard Availability Services, and it was awesome place to go and work, but it was a big data center, intimidating as hell to go in there. But I went in and I'm like, I need to know. I'm a contractor. What are the chances of me become permanent? What's everybody like here? Am I going to like this place? Because I got a cushy gig and free cable.
Right.
And I was really nervous about it, but I met those guys. And what was funny is as soon as I walked in, everybody comes running around like, F-bomb! F-bomb! So
your world
I was known as F-bomb, and what I didn't know, and he pulled up the chat while I'm sitting there after I agreed to accept the job, after I interviewed them, is I didn't realize this, but he pulls up his computer, and he turns it around, and he shows me the chat history. And the moment I dropped the F-bomb, got an echo talking to me in the background, sorry. As soon as he shows me his chat, as soon as I drop the F-bomb, it says hired, 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 hired. Everybody in the chat wrote hired. So I am not saying that dropping an F-bomb is
I don't think anybody was in danger of copying that move at all, actually.
It worked in that case. So fast forward about 3 years, been at SunGuard for 3 years. A great experience, learned a ton, really, really increased my network chops. And I knew I wanted to get out of that job too, though. I wanted to get into this SE role that I have now because a friend of mine was an SE for Fortinet.
Yep.
And we're sitting there having beers one day, sitting around the campfire, got a fire pit out by my house, and we're out there chatting. And he's like, you need to get out of this role you're in now because you got a good personality, people like you, you're technical. He says, there's this role I've got. I'm an SE, and he said, I'm going to tell you what I make. And he told me what he made, and I was like, so what do you do again? And he started telling me about what he does as an SE and then what he's making for a living. And I'm like, you've got to be freaking kidding me. Which, of course, I dropped an F-bomb there, too. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, man. Hired. I was like, you've got to be kidding. You can make that kind of money doing all the things that I already like doing? And so he's like, yeah, next time a job opens up, apply. So next time a job opened up, I applied. And I bombed that interview. And I didn't drop an F-bomb, which I probably should have, right? I got the job.
No?
But I bombed it from the start. I mean, he is like, what's the difference between a stateful and a stateless firewall? I'm like, psh, I don't even know what those words mean, man. I have no idea what those words are.
Nice.
I have been a network engineer. I have not touched security. I loathe the security guys. I don't know, but I want this job. And he says, so he and I chatted for a good 15, 20 minutes after that.
Right.
And I was like, listen, obviously I'm probably not ready for this role. I said, but what do I need to do to be ready for this role? Because I want to work at Fortinet.
Yeah. So this is, hold on a second, because this is interesting because like you basically threw up the white flag and you would do what most people would do after the fact, all the while feeling what I would call like blissfully ignorant, because the most people's feelings, I always stress this, like when they leave interviews, that like you really don't know how it went. I don't care how well or not well you thought. I mean, dude, you dropped an F-bomb, right? So it's like you just don't know unless you ask, right?
Yeah.
And I don't mean saying, do you see it? I hate this question. Do you see any reason why you wouldn't move forward with me? Like, because people are gonna go, no, of course I don't, and they're just gonna shove you off. But you have to strategically ask that question, and the question is not, do you see anything that would prevent you from because that's not what you want to know. You want to know how the interview went, right? Yeah. So why don't you just ask how the interview went, right? Like, hey, how do you think this went? Well, yeah, but but what I mean is like you often think you do, and what your perception is rarely anywhere near reality. You know what I mean? Like, and I'll give you an example. You thought, holy crap, I dropped an F-bomb, and then a half hour later, the recruiter called you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, what I mean is, like, unless you know,
it's true.
You don't, right? So, just ask, and don't ask that question that finds its way into every interview book on planet Earth that says, do you see any reason why you shouldn't? Because first of all, on top of that, everybody asks that anyway, and they all read it in a book somewhere or online, and it's like,
what are my
top
next
10
steps?
Questions. Yeah, what are my next steps? What can we do next? Yes. That's not what I sound like in interviews, by the way.
It's the first time I've heard this voice from Aaron.
It should be your new voice
for all of us.
I don't know. It felt appropriate.
Did we just become best friends?
Yeah.
So what did that dude tell you? How do you get the job?
So he told me, he says, look, because you got to go get security experience. And he says, you need to get some Fortinet certifications. Because you got to go get, NSE 1, NSE 2, and go get your NSE 4. His NSE 3 is just sales. He goes, you don't need that one. He goes, get 1, 2, 4. 1 and 2 are both free online. Go take them.
Yep.
So
by the way, they're free online, folks. They are still free online. Go to the Fortinet website. look up the NSE 1, 2, 3. It's super cool. They have great videos. They show you like good visuals. What I mean is like, because they're all like produced videos, and like you could go, and maybe we'll drop a link in the description if I remember to do so. But yeah, it's free. That's the best part. So to that point, if you want to have some sort of security cert on your, just like the Juniper stuff was with the Junos Genius, if you want that cert or at least something, go get it. It's free. I mean, you're not doing anything important right now anyway. You're just listening to a podcast.
So I know somebody's going to ask, Jeff, how difficult are they?
So the 1 and 2 they're gimme certs. They're actually a great way to pad your resume because
100%.
It's one of those where it's like you answer it wrong and it's like, well, the correct answer is this. Want to try again? Oh, okay. Right. They're an introduction to security in general. They're talking about email hacks and all. I mean, it's nothing. It's nothing.
What's phishing? You know.
Yeah. What's phishing and what's smishing? What's whatever.
Right.
There's social engineering. There's all that kind of stuff in there. But it's straightforward. They're a great way to pad your resume with some certs. Like I said, and it's part of the reason I don't put a ton of store behind certs is because you can go and just get certs, and you can pad your resume with certs. I used to do the interviews at SunGuard, and there were people that would come in with a CCIE that couldn't troubleshoot their way out of a paper bag. No. They would have the cert because they did the brain dump, but not the knowledge to do the job. And so it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth for certs. Not that I don't think they're important, but they're better for the interview than for proof that you know how to do the job.
Yeah,
sure.
So anyway, this guy told me NSE 1. Yeah, exactly.
So NSE 1, NSE 2, easy
Get
peasy.
the NSE 4, and then go get some security experience.
Okay, so how did you do that? How does one get experience then? Because you're back at the chicken before the egg scenario like you were earlier, right? How does one get a security experience without having security experience?
So this is the benefit of knowing an SE. My friend that was the SE, he said, listen, because I got a client, school district of Philadelphia, they are looking for somebody who has a strong networking background, and they're willing to teach them security.
Whoa.
I was like, sold. He goes, but it doesn't pay any more than you make right now. I said, sold. He says, and you don't get the free parking and all that. Perfect. Let's do it. So he set me up with the interview, and it was ironically straight across the street from where I was working. And I literally walked across the street. Go ahead, Andy.
So this timing is interesting. Did you reach out to him after that interview and say, hey, I need something? Or did he just happen to hit you after that interview? And like did this job just drop out of the sky? Or were you like looking for it?
This was probably about 3 months later. Because I told him, he asked me how the interview with my now manager went. I told him how it went. Told him I bombed it. I expected to bomb it, but I'm glad I made the contact with Doug. Also, by the way, the NSE 1 and 2, I went and got the same day he sent me the links for him. I went and passed the NSE 1 and 2. That's how easy they are.
Okay.
And then I emailed him back to let him know I passed him because that was the, hey, by the way, I've got those certs. Those two things are checked off the list.
Good. So that guy was looking out for you. Like he saw that job and thought of you, right?
Yeah.
Your buddy.
So,
okay.
Yeah, my buddy. Yep.
Nice.
So, I told him I needed to get some experience. So he kind of kept his eyes open for some opportunities. And so when this job opened up, I went over there, and sure enough, they really wanted somebody with a strong networking background, and I was able to get in on those merits alone, even though it was a security job. And I got in there, and the best thing I could say is I had a boss that his principle was, listen, just go out and break stuff, Jeff. We'll figure out how to fix it together, but you're not going to learn unless you go break some stuff, which is perfect. Well, I know you wouldn't do that in most networks, but but his philosophy was, go break stuff. He wouldn't break anything really bad. But his idea was, don't be afraid about losing your job if you screw up. You're going to screw up, and we'll figure out how to fix it. Just go learn how the stuff works. So I went there. I built a lab from scratch. They had some extra hardware. So I built a lab that they're still using today. I built some tools, some automation tools for them. I went and did everything I could to make myself really useful in that role. And I didn't go there with the idea that this would just be a short-term job. I went there expecting that I would go and have to get some security experience. But to the boss's credit that I had there, this guy, I'll never be able to thank him enough. He and I were sitting having beers one day at a conference, and he asked me what I want for next steps. He's like, do you want my job? Do you want this? I was like, honestly, man, I want to be a Fortinet SE. Well, that's the job I want. And he said, oh, interesting. Okay. So he approached me about 6 months later, and he says, Jeff, I don't want to lose you, man. but Fortinet has an SE position open. And now I've only been here for not even a year at the school district. And he goes, because I don't want to lose you. He says, but I think you should apply for it. This is my boss telling me this. Mm-hmm. So I go and I apply for the job. And at this point, I've already got my NSE 4 and I've got my NSE 1 and 2. Now I've got a year's worth of experience behind my belt. And I submit my resume. And I get an interview with the same guy that interviewed me before. And it was great because I turned to him. I said, Doug, I said, you told me I have to go get my NSE 1. I got that. You told me I have to get my NSE 2. I've got that. You told me I have to get my NSE 4. I've got that. You told me to get some experience, and I've got a year's worth of experience under my belt working with some of the largest FortiGates that Fortinet has to offer, along with all these other products that Fortinet has. And then I had 6 more technical interviews, and then landed the job, and the rest is history. And now I'm working out of a FortiCamper.
And now you have a FortiTrailer.
They interviewed you 6 times for this gig?
It was about 6 technical interviews.
Wow.
They
all
were
technical, huh?
So the first interview with him, it wasn't really technical. It was, his probative questions like, what's the difference between a stateful and stateless firewall? I'm not going to answer that myself. So all that stuff I was able to answer with a year under my belt. So I called that a technical interview. It was more of let's make sure you've actually learned some stuff. Then there were 5 more technical interviews, 4 or 5, and then I had an interview with some senior manager, director guy, Rick, and then I had HR interviews, and then I had to give a demo. And giving a demo was its own technical interview because now you've got everybody watching. You've got to tell them how to do something.
This is frightening. So they all not only know Fortinet, they work at Fortinet. And so the one thing that they do and they know, and this is also what they do on a daily basis, you don't. And this is the definition of preaching to the choir, right? Like, you're trying to tell them what they already know, and it's like, that has got to be one of the most frightening situations one could ever put themselves in. This is the apex of what people call imposter syndrome.
This is like teaching Spanning Tree to Radia Perlman, right?
Yeah. Well, no. This is yeah, right. Exactly. But this is like you're telling them what their job is, but it's also the job you're trying to get, and they're like, you got to be thinking in your head the whole time, like they're looking at every little thing I'm doing. Like, obviously you can't. I mean, I think the whole point of this is that they don't want you to lie, right? So it's okay to not know, right? And it's okay to skip over stuff if you don't know it that well. Like, somebody will ask you if they want to know, but I think what they were trying to figure out is like, hey, is this guy going to BS us or not? If he doesn't know something, or if we trip him up with a question, it's okay to say, you know what? Actually, that's a really good question. I'll have to get back to you on that because I can't remember right now. It's been a minute since I've gotten into that feature or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and to be fair, I did not have to demo their stuff necessarily.
Okay,
but I had to
you
give
did
a technical. No, I threatened to, and then I chickened out, and instead I did a demo of how subnetting worked, which was a terrible demo.
So you just had to teach them something.
Do anything.
Anything.
Yeah. Now.
So why do you think they did that? Why do you think they made you teach? Because you're not a teacher.
No, but the reason they make you teach is because one of the biggest things that you need to have in this job, one of the biggest strengths that you have to have, in my opinion, is the ability to show somebody how something works, be able to be interrupted, be able to be distracted, be able to be questioned, and just roll with it. You have to. This is a job where you kind of have to be okay with not really knowing how the conversation is going to go, because there's no such thing as a canned demo when you're dealing with other engineers, right? You can put together a canned demo, but then it's a really crappy demo.
Yep.
No one wants to just see you regurgitate information.
Yeah.
So
right.
What they were looking for was they want to see your personality come out. They want to see you be able to talk to something. They want to be able to ask a question and see, did you get rattled by that? Did me asking you, but why is this not the right answer? Does that bother you, and are you able to recover from it? And then, exactly as you said, they want to ask you a question you don't know the answer to, and see, are you going to be the guy that's going to come and represent the company and then BS a customer? Because that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest way to get yourself in over your head as an SE is to BS the customer, or any job really. Like technical interviews, same way.
So if you don't know, if you don't know something, tell them you don't know, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But my favorite answer is
right. I don't know, but I'll find out, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, and if they're calling about some problem they're having, my favorite answer is, I don't have a clue, man. Let's go figure it out.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing I like better than not knowing the answer to something. I actually enjoy not knowing the answer. And
there's something to be said about that too, because you're also there's an amount of empathy there, because you're like, wow, that's a really good question, because I haven't thought of that, nor have I seen that. Let's figure that out, because hey, guess what? We're now in the same boat, because now both of us have to figure this out, because if somebody else comes to me with this question, I got to be able to speak to it, right? So this doesn't happen again. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that if you are like the evangelist or, sales engineer, and maybe you even go to conferences and speak about Fortinet, or, you know what I mean? That like that type of person that you know everything, and you know every little minutia of the product. And that's just false, because it's pretty impossible, right? Like, and it's also impossible because I there's something I just have to ask you. Like, it's impossible to me to think about that, because I feel like there's so much more to being an SE than that. And so my question to you would be then, what do you think the most important trait to being an SE is? So like, if you had to pinpoint one thing about, and this could be anything, it doesn't have to be like a personality trait, right? I think that's usually what pops into heads when you hear the word trait, but anything. So something on your resume, right? We clearly know that you're not a huge cert guy, so leave that one alone this time. But you know what I mean? So we are the art of network engineering, right?
Right.
So what art is this? Are you building sculptures? Are you making paintings? You know what I mean? Like, what's the best trait for an SE?
And if it's not one thing, what are the things that are needed, right? Like, give me a list of 3 or 5 if that's...
Well, it's interesting, because the role of an SE is unlike just about any other... Well, it's actually more like a bunch of roles, right? So an SE role is your part architect, because someone's going to come to you and they're going to say, where does this fit in my environment? How's the best way for me to put this in? Tell me your best practices, which is the worst question, because best practices for me is not best practices for you, is not best practices for somebody else. Depends on your setup, depends on your industry, depends on what you've got going on.
Yep.
But it's you're part architect. You're definitely part network engineer, because you're going to be these are network firewalls. You're dealing with BGP and OSPF and MPLS, and you're dealing with that kind of stuff. So you kind of have to be a network engineer, and you're also part of a sales team. So I think probably the biggest trait I think an SE needs is just being willing to, or being able to dive in and roll with the punches. Yeah, and I personally have always been somebody that when, my friend turns to me, he's like, how deep's the water? I'm like, I don't know. And I dive in. I don't jump in feet first. I dive in to find out how deep the water is. Meanwhile, this guy's back on, with a pole checking the depth of the water.
Right.
I've always I like to dive into a problem and get there. And SEs, you need to be reactive. You need to be proactive. You need to be really versatile. But I think, I don't know, you're an SE. What do you think is the main trait? Because it's an interesting question, because it's such a versatile role. You're doing so many different, wearing so many hats.
Yeah, I would agree with the adaptability part, right? You said roll with the punches, but I mean that's essentially what it is, adaptability. But I think one of the biggest things you could do for yourself, and this isn't just SE specific, is just know that you don't know everything and be totally cool with that. And you're not going to, even if, like, let's just say that you work at Juniper, right? And maybe even more specific, let's say that you work for Juniper and you're on the MX team. All right. That's all I deal with is Juniper MX. And I don't know everything about Juniper MX. That's cool. Because guess what? Someone could come to you at some point and be like, hey, I saw Cisco was doing this with this. Can we do that here? You'd be like, what? Cisco? What do they do? What are they doing? Sorry, I don't know. Like that, you know what I mean? You've choked yourself. Like you locked yourself in the room and shut all the windows, you know what I mean? And forced yourself to learn that. Do you think that, because this is the other part of it, like the adaptability thing. Do you think that there's a personality type? Because here's the thing. The title, I know you said at the beginning, the title has the word sales in it, right? And you did mention that you had sales experience, and
yes,
I'll say that I didn't before I got my sales engineering job, my first sales engineering job, and somebody took a chance on me. I had training experience. I was a trainer before, because like you said, it's kind of similar. Like you were aspiring to be at one point.
Right.
They're very similar because you're telling people how things work, right? So you got to figure out how to do that. Know your audience. That's one of the biggest things too, right? So I think the personality part is huge, and I think sales can be taught, but I don't think people should be scared off by the term sales, because I don't want people to think that I don't want people to think that you're, Andy, like earmuffs, are a used car salesman. But Andy was one hell of a used car salesman. You know what I mean? Yeah. And
do you think,
tell you his numbers?
Do you think you have to be aggressive?
No, so remember when I told you the description of the job was?
Well, you're jumping into the water head first. Aaron has a strong personality. Like it seems to me like A-type sales experience. Like you seem to have a strong kind of constitution, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but can you be a soft touch as an SE, or do you have to kind of
remember how I described the job? You're the nerd that talks to their nerds. I'm not, for the most part, 99% of my conversations are with other engineers that are at the exact same level, and so I don't have this I'm up on a pedestal,
right?
Or they're up on a pedestal. It's you're engineer to engineer, so
authentic,
and you're not trying to sell them, right? You're just showing them the tech, right?
Heck no, it sells itself. It should,
right.
Otherwise you shouldn't be working there.
So
no, that's the thing. I strongly believe this too. Sorry, not to take off, but I'm glad you poked on that, like how to be forceful, because again, it does carry on with the part that I mentioned about the sales part scaring folks off, because there's an amount of like, you do have to help the sales team, but I do firmly believe, because I have yet to have a sales engineering role in my life where I didn't truly believe that it would sell itself. Yeah. Right. And so I feel as if, like if I worked at Fortinet, I would tell you straight up, I would have no problem with that. And the thing about that is that makes you then 100% authentic. And it doesn't come off sleazy. It because you're telling the truth, you're speaking your truth, and you're educating people. And if you're anything like me, and I'm sure Jeff's the same way, you get on the phone with these guys, and they're like you, Andy and Dan, and both of you talk to SEs, I'm sure, all the time. And I would say more often than not, they're more like you two than they are like me and Jeff.
Yeah,
because you don't have to have an A-type aggressive personality. That's what the salesperson's for. Right. You know what I mean? What they do to guys like me and Jeff when we have sales engineering roles is they task us with doing ancillary stuff that involves having a personality. So we draw the short straw because we're like, oh, you guys are loud, but hey,
could you man this booth?
Yeah, right, exactly. Can you man this booth and talk about stuff all day? It's like, oh, that's really what I want to do. But yeah, I think more often than not, the most successful folks are the ones that are just authentic, regardless of their personality, and also regardless even of their knowledge level, because like, we talked about the certs and experience and stuff. Like, what experience does one need to have to be an SE? I think the experience is kind of just like all over the place. Like you got to pick and choose, but you got to be able to articulate how you use all of those things to form like Voltron. Gosh, showing my age here, but Voltron wasn't squat until maybe Power Rangers. Kids can relate to that, right? Power Rangers, anybody? Do they still do that? I don't know.
I think they're on like the 6th rendition of it though. So.
Okay, so there's new Power Rangers, but you get the idea. It's like they're all okay by themselves, but once they come together, now we're talking, right? So it's like you take any one of those little things where you're strong at, and it's like, hey, look, I'll tell you straight up, I'm not the best engineer, I'm not the best designer, and I'm not the best like people person, but I'm pretty okay at all of those things. You know what I mean? And you put them all together, and boom, there's the Power Rangers.
So is the secret sauce being technical, and you can teach it to people?
That's definitely part of it. So also working for a vendor is probably a little different than Aaron working for a provider, because for a vendor, we have 50 products, but I have roughly 5 products that I really have to know. Right. And then we have specialists for everything else. So I learn these new products. I deal with these 5 products all day long. I am as close to an expert as you can get on our FortiGates, and I still don't know all the stuff because there's just so much to them.
Yeah.
But so I need to be able to talk in depth about the products I really know. I need to be able to explain at a high level products that we have, like web application firewalls. I couldn't really tell you, anything about web application firewalls. They're not my bailiwick. It's not the area I'm strong in, but I can explain a little bit about how our web application firewalls work, and I can, tell you some of our key features. Or NAC, another one. Yeah, I'm not going to demo NAC for you, but I can tell you why I think our NAC is a good NAC and why people seem to like it.
Yeah.
Being able to do that and just have a conversation, and as Aaron said, be authentic, that is super key. I never poo-poo the competition. Whenever someone asks me what we do different than Meraki, I'm like, listen, I don't work for Cisco, man. I've heard great things about the Merakis. I can tell you what we do because that's what I know. Being authentic, being able to have a good conversation with somebody, sometimes telling them, listen, honestly, I don't think you need this. That's twice the price. You could probably get away with this for what you need. And just having a relationship, being able to carry on a conversation, I honestly, and I'm curious how you guys feel on this, I feel like network engineers as a whole actually are a little bit different breed of nerd than like computer programmers or the we tend to have personalities. We tend to, be beer drinking, hanging out, cussing, swearing guys, who don't necessarily live in our mom's base. Not saying there's a problem with that. It's the cheapest way to live.
I still like Mountain Dew. Just as much as the next guy. Come on.
But I'm saying I feel like network engineers, there already is a personality trait there.
Yeah.
And which means you're going to get along well with other network engineers, and that's what the SE role is about.
If you like it, you'll be good at it, right? Because again, when you like something, it's authentic, right? Because we talked about the home lab like a bunch here, because we love that. However you set that up, may it be virtually or physically. We love the home lab because, and I'm always like, hey, put it on your resume, right? Like, but when you start talking about it, you're like, check out what I got. Check out what I got. Like, oh, I got this. Like, I got it right. First thing I did when you got on here was like, look at my FortiGate 60F, and we started talking about how fast it was and all this other stuff. But like, I that's hard to find. Like, we weren't trying to sell each other on anything, you know what I mean? But like, it's sure, I guess from an outsider's perspective, like it could have sure sounded like that, right? Like, we're just pumping each other up, like, but there's so much, that rolls into that authentic piece, and of course it helps if you enjoy it. I would say that about any job, honestly. You should probably stop doing it if you don't enjoy it, because you really only have one shot here on
So I'll kind of inject on that. I was working with a company once, or a vendor, and are you gonna tell us who it was? No.
You sure? Can you give us a rhymes like or sounds like?
No.
Sounds like Schmortishman.
Wisco.
But the SE told me which model he thought we should have, and but he didn't. I guess this was bad on their part because they didn't communicate him and the actual sales guy.
The rep, yeah.
And he was like, I think y'all need this one. And the sales guy, on a different call, we were talking about it, and he's like, yeah, I think you need this one. And it was like the higher one, and I'm
most
like,
expensive one.
I wanted to be like, why do you think that? Yeah. Like, please tell me why you think that. So
that's
that
funny.
was. So what I'm going with is I totally, me being a network engineer on the other side of it, I totally appreciate an authentic SE over someone who's just trying to be more salesy, right?
Right.
When you've hit on when I can't necessarily tell you what you have to have. What I can tell you is what doesn't work for an SE, and it is somebody who's super salesy, because part of being an SE is being the guy that's on the engineer's side. You're on the customer side. You're the guy that's supposed to be there,
advocate.
keeping them from getting themselves into a world of hurt and explaining why you think this is the best solution.
I mean, like, Jeff, how awful would you feel if you sold people a bunch of 124Es and they only have 3 devices on each one of their stores?
Yeah.
Right? Like, come on. So I think that's part of it too. Cause like I wouldn't, in any SU role I've ever been in, I wouldn't want to wreck somebody's house. I don't want to be responsible for that. In fact, quite the opposite. I want to be the one at the end of the day that's like, I recommended they did this and look how awesome it worked. And that was my idea, right? Because, you want to take some pride in that, and a little bit at least.
Yeah, if you do your job well, then you're the person they call to ask about other things. So if I get them into the right, FortiGate, our firewall, if I get them into the right piece of equipment and they're happy and we maintain a relationship, when they're looking for NAC 2 years down the road, they're going to come back to me first because they liked working with me.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll second that, because I've had experiences where one of my SEs, I can like call him up when I'm having an issue, and he'll jump on like a Zoom with me, and a Zoom or WebEx, whatever the case is. Don't want to give away who it was.
Troubleshoot.
Nah, he got it now.
He works at Shmaraki.
No, I don't know. But anyways, he'll jump on and we'll share screen, and he'll walk me through something. Just if I have a question, I can call him up whenever, and he'll try to help me out as soon as possible. And then on the flip side, I've got other SEs that I have to constantly reach out to, but they're like, well, hold on, let me bring this person in. Right, once they made the sale, they no longer want to talk to you anymore. Yeah. They'll push whoever's an expert in whatever you purchased. They'll
there's some delegate. I would say some companies actually draw a line there and like make the SE only do pre-sale. So they're like, dude, okay. you can't be handling all that stuff, because sometimes they have a lot on their plate anyway. But I think
there's a fine line you got to draw as an SE too on that.
Yeah. Well, and I didn't mean to make
I'm not your knock.
Right, totally.
Right,
no,
and I didn't
totally
mean
true.
to make it like that. It was more like if I had just a random question kind of thing, like he would help me out on that. Not just every second I ran through a different.
Right, yeah. Hey, what are you doing? You call me like 9 p.m. Hey, what are you doing?
But Jeff, do you get pulled into that? You'll have like customers that you've talked to before, like. Do they have your number? Are they calling you with issues? Because that could be.
I've got several customers on Teams. We just chit chat throughout the day.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, mine have in the past as well.
Yeah, not necessarily Fortinet related stuff. Just
basic stuff. But, we all like the same stuff. Shockingly, right?
But,
like,
but do you have to create boundaries of like, hey man, I'm not the knock. Like, are you able to redirect them if they start to,
Yeah. So for
take
the most
advantage?
part, people respect those boundaries.
Yeah, okay,
You're going to find some customers that don't, and then you learn some tricks. Like I got to be really careful, because if a customer's watching this, I don't want them to think I'm talking about them if I'm
Wait
not.
a second, he's used that on me.
If I am talking about them, I don't want them to know.
Yeah.
But there have been customers in the past where I see their email and I'm like, I'm going to wait a couple hours to respond to that.
Right.
I have the time right now to respond. But they have emailed me on what is clearly a ticket-related question.
Right.
Sure.
And this is something that I need to draw a line.
Yep.
So there are some tricks you do like that. I never ignore them. I never want anyone to feel bad.
Sure.
And there are times when I just flat out say, hey, look, man, this sounds like a tech-related thing. They deal with this every day.
Yeah, it'd be so easy for them to take care of it. Totally. Yeah.
They'll
like,
be able to deal
I
with
could
this.
try to help you, but like, trust me, they're well versed. Jeff, I have, me personally, one very important last question for you, my friend.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Well, I think it's a touchy thing, because we talked about the title, right? Sales engineer. So you're a little bit of both. And you've actually said this about previous jobs that you've had. What do you say to someone, because we have a lot of network engineers, what do you say to someone that doesn't have sales experience that wants to be a sales engineer? And if someone approaches, like if you go through the process and they say, sorry, you just don't have sales experience, how does one overcome that?
I think mentorship as an SE is as important as sales experience. So if you want to get into an SE role and you don't have sales experience, that's hard to go find. Find out a way to share your information with others, be it a podcast or be it a blog, or just finding somebody to take under your wing and train that person. And then when someone says to you in your interview, listen, you don't really have some sales experience, you're like, but what I do have is I have a lot of training experience, and let me go ahead and tell you about that. And that's about redirecting the interview. But
sure.
I would you agree that training in sales are, at least in this role, are somewhat similar.
Yeah, it's all storytelling, right? Like that's the whole idea. It's like it's any form of that, whether it's education or even like a product manager, even, right? Like someone that's really deep in something. That all they do all day, every day, is explain how what they're working on the most works.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe articulation is the best way to put that, and I would append that with one of my favorite terms, which is know your audience, because if you're in an SE role and you're talking to all types of different folks, right? You're talking to Dan Richards on the phone and you're zooming him, right, to help him get through his unnamed device, right, and help him with his problem. But also you could turn around the next hour and be talking to a CIO, and although that may sound intimidating, you have to understand that the CIO hasn't been in the weeds in a very, very long time, and you can't be speeds and feeding those type of folks. Like you have to test the waters and see what everybody knows. You're not trying to talk over anybody's head. You're just trying to feed them enough and let them get more and more and more from you. So I guess maybe I answered my own question.
So what was the answer to the question? Find a mentor? I got
No, it's be a mentor.
Be a mentor. So if you're trying to get an SE job, you interview and they tell you don't have sales experience, you're saying the answer to that is be a mentor?
I think it's do anything you can to show people or to talk to people about technology that maybe aren't as technical as you.
Yeah. That you can articulate.
Okay.
Yeah, you can articulate complicated things, right?
Yeah. Gotcha.
If you look at my LinkedIn profile, it said this for years. I just never changed it. But my LinkedIn profile, the only thing I have there, which by the way you can get to by going to fortijeff.com, which is stupid because it just goes to LinkedIn, right? But it says
that's like DNS.
I think,
yeah, wait, what's the IP of that?
I won't tell you my Google Voice number, but let's just say it has 40
okay,
in it.
all right.
But it says I translate geek into English. I think the ability to translate geek into English is as important in the SE role because of exactly what Aaron said. Sometimes you're not dealing with the engineers.
Yeah.
Most of the time when you're dealing with the engineers, you want to be able to translate that geek down to their level if they don't know your product. You need to be able to break this down in a different way.
Yeah.
That's why I say become a mentor. You've helped people in the past. You've studied with other groups. You learn the best by teaching, but also it is very much like sales. And then I'll end with one final thing because I think we're past our hour here. From a sales thing, I did have when I was working in sales. I had a sales manager one time who said to me, "All things being equal, people are going to buy from the person they like.
Yep.
Okay.
All things not being equal, people are going to buy from the person they like."
Yeah.
So some of this is in the SE role is just go make friends. Most of my customers I legitimately am friends with a bunch of these people I'm customers with. Some of them are in the Discord channel because I've invited them. And I'm like, you got to check out this podcast right over there.
That's so rad. That's
the same thing they told me at the car place was nobody's ever going to spend a lot of money. Nobody's ever going to, buy something from someone that's expensive from someone they don't like.
Yeah, I know it's a cliche, but it's true.
Yeah. Get them to like you.
Customer
we
service,
bought
man.
from Fortinet when I was a customer because we liked our SE and we liked our account manager.
Yeah.
And they bought us lots of beer.
Well, and I can attest to that they definitely do over at Fortinet. You guys got deep pockets. Dude, Jeff, thanks, man. We appreciate that. It's such a mysterious role out there. I hope we turn some folks on to maybe the possibility of doing so, and they have, I don't know, kind of a clear path to get there, whatever role you're in right now. Heck, if you don't even have an IT job, period. And Jeff, you're in the Discord server with everybody. So Jeff's there to chit chat, share his wisdom, tell you everything he knows about being an SE. I'm sure if you haven't been able to tell by listening, one of the things that SEs are good at is explaining what they do. And because that's all they do every day is explain things. So if you want to pick his brain, I would be more than I'm voluntolding you right now, Jeff. So I hope you're okay with this.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah,
if you didn't say it, I would.
Okay. I know. I knew you'd be okay with it. But I'm sure Jeff would love to give you tips and pointers on how to get in the industry and how to take that path if you wanted more specifics, and even if you needed help, right? Like I think one of the things you kept repeating over and over was, without saying it, was that every time you wanted to get something, you basically just told a bunch of people what you were going to do, what you wanted to do. And then those people were kind of like working in your favor in the background because everybody knew what you were trying to do. And they were like, oh, I know somebody that's trying to do that. And then your name popped up, right? So don't be afraid to speak it into fruition, I guess, is the other part of that, right? So we one last thing, where can we find you? Obviously, we know FortiNetChef.com is going to redirect to your LinkedIn page, but other than the Discord server, is there any other places, Twitter?
That's where I am right now, is on the Discord server. I tried to get FortiJeff on there, but another Fortinet employee took FortiJeff. So
on Discord?
No, on Twitter.
Oh, on Twitter.
So I think I have Forti Clark on there, but and I'm not even posting. So I'm not a big poster on social media.
Okay. But the Discord server.
Yeah, but I'm absolutely someone who responds. In fact, I'll throw this out there. We talked about mentoring. There's a girl that works at the school district of Philadelphia right now as a network engineer, because this girl reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, hey, we both used to work at that mom and pop MSP, and I want to be a network engineer. How do I get into it? I helped her study for her CCNA.
Oh, wow.
We had a lot of chats. When it came time to interview, we did interview prep, and then I at least got her an interview. She got herself the job, but I was at least able to get her the interview. So that's true of me. I'm sure, I know it's true of you guys. You guys have offered up a lot of times. There's nothing better than paying it forward and helping.
I couldn't agree more.
Someone who's new. So, and we get to make friends in the process. So it's great.
Yeah, and sometimes we start a podcast and get to talk to cool people like you all day. So I'm not mad at that. And just like Andy says, kind of like the highlight of our week. Whatever that says about us. Well, thanks again. We do sincerely appreciate you coming, even though we're eventually going to run out of people Andy used to work at the Comcast NOC with. But while we still have you, we
I got some names for you.
No, I'm sure you do. Yeah, we appreciate you coming on here. I know it's kind of late there, but your words of wisdom have been great. Please join the Discord server if you can. It's all about the journey. Find Jeff, ping him, ask him questions, pick his brain. He loves to talk, clearly, so he'll have no problem talking to you and answering questions. Just like I'm the same way, of course, and everybody here really. Just out here trying to share the wealth, spread the love, man, spread the love, peace, love. Come on, everybody. Peace, man. Yeah, feeling hard. I hope this will make it to video, right, Andy?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Sure, why not?
Yeah, why not? Why not? So everybody can see the Forti camper behind you. So
that's right.
Thanks for listening. If you can, like, subscribe. If this is on YouTube, I'm pointing at something. If not, you're just hearing me say it, and it makes zero sense. But hey, if you're listening to it for the first time on any one of your favorite podcast streaming venues, then subscribe there too. It's not going to hurt you. That way you can keep up to date on all the cool things that we're doing. So until next week, ladies and gentlemen, see ya.
Hey everyone, this is AJ. If you like what you heard today, then make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Smash that bell icon to get notified of all of our future episodes. Also, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at ArtOfNetEng. That's Art of NETENG. You can also find us on the web at artofnetworkengineering.com, where we post all of our show notes. You can read blog articles from the co-hosts and guests, and also a lot more news and info from the networking world. Thanks for listening.